Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and this is a very special show, and I'm very, very happy that we are in the middle of a very exciting phase for us as individual as well as citizen of the world. While world leaders come together and they think about how to transform the world towards a better place, that is important and relevant for us, and especially when Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi gets so much warm reception from world leaders, and you hear remarks like President of United States of America, the nation superpower, even in a lighter vein, when he says that I should take your autograph, we feel good coming with Indian roots. But today we are going far beyond Prime Minister Narendra Modi's role at the moment, something that relates to each one of you, the kind of role that you have accepted and how you find your role as a leader in your chosen field. There are many lessons which we learn from people who have experienced and who have taught, and I am very proud to be welcoming Professor Suresh U. Kumar ji to our studio today. And first of all, thank you very much.
Namaste, and thank you for having me.
So very briefly, I'll mention that not only you have been a corporate executive, you have been a serial entrepreneur, you have done PhD in leadership, and you are also co-founder of Indian Americans for Biden-Harris. And now, as you have taken up this new role as the president-elect for the important organization, the Indus Entrepreneurs for the New Jersey chapter. So let us begin with this. When you are moving towards success, do you always need company, or some people say that I'm good, I'm at my best when I'm alone. So talk to me about sense of team and togetherness on the pathway of growth.
First of all, thank you for having me. So when you talk about leadership, there are two aspects of it. So one of them is to be able to lead yourself, to be able to grow, set targets, and achieve that. So individual leadership is important. But I think to be a real leader, to have influence, you need to have followers. So without followers, you really don't have a leader who can really make dramatic changes. So therefore, I think it is important to be able to work with a team and to be able to lead others by influencing them. And that's, for example, what people like Prime Minister Modi or Joe Biden of the US is doing, is that they're able to influence people with their thoughts and ideologies and then motivate them to act. So therefore, their impact is much more than the individual.
So there is something which is relevant for everyone, whatever be the level, whether it is the corporate world or the political world. People are not open to accept you, and they won't open their heart for you unless you have ABC in you. And when I say ABC, I would request you to fill that in. So, for example, the kind of compliments which world leaders have showered on Prime Minister Modi, which means he has given them the kind of space where they are not looking at it as their ego trip. There is something bigger on which they are collectively able to focus, whether it is Australian Prime Minister speaking in front of thousands of people saying that Prime Minister Modi is the boss. So that requires certain kind of special understanding and appreciation of the news. What is that?
It's a great question, and I would put them in a few different buckets. So the first thing is to have charisma, which means that you've got to be a likable person. So that's almost a given, right? So if you look at people like Barack Obama, and if you look at any world leader who's popular, who's done well, they have that down. But beyond that, charisma alone would not do. So you should also be able to have character. And character means somebody who follows through on commitments, keep their promises. So that is the second aspect that you need to have there. And then you also need to have results. So the first and two is good, but without showing some concrete results for the people that you lead. So it could be a small team, a small startup, or a company, and at the highest stage you have global leaders like Prime Minister Modi, for whom results have been there consistently. So once you put all of this together, that's when you start having a followership. People start to believe in you, and others kind of look at you with envy and say, I would like to be like you, or calling you boss. That happens because of all these things that happen over a period of time.
If we look at the basic difference between corporate leadership and political leadership, what is it that you think differentiates? Because you have some industry leaders who will never venture into politics. So is there some difference in their basic prime focus? Of course, profit leads corporate world, we know, yet they are also guided by their inner desire to serve and make impact on the larger audience. For example, you look at JRD Tata, Mr. Tata in India, and there are other leaders in their industry, and if you start from America, then you see that Bill Gates has also ventured beyond his world of business to philanthropy. So if it makes sense, how would you see that this guy is fit for politics and this is not?
Another good question. So the way I would look at it is, somebody who's running a company, they have a limited group of stakeholders that they have got to please. So for example, your customers, your employees, your shareholders, and your customers. These are the primary group of shareholders, stakeholders, I would say, that you need to be pleasing, right, to make sure that they are happy and satisfied. But when you look at a public leader, whether it is a governor or a president, prime minister, etc., they have almost everybody is their stakeholders, including the CEO of companies are their stakeholders, right? So they have to have a much broader outlook, and therefore I think the qualities are different, and not some of them overlap. So you need some things that are common in both, but in both these fields you need to have certain skills that may not be there in the other field. So I would not compare them as being better or worse, etc. I would just say that it's a different skill set that you need to have. And I think one thing though I would encourage is the crossover taking place both ways. I think you need to have more corporate leaders getting into politics, and you need to have more politicians maybe getting into the corporate fields. That way there will be a cross fertilization of leadership ideas, and it will make both fields better.
Yeah. So I don't know, our former president of America, Donald J. Trump, heard your advice, and probably he ventured from corporate to the politics. But coming back to the skill of negotiation, so you are representing your organization, whether it is a company or a nation. Correct. And there are few things at stake, and you need to be focusing on what serves your party or your nation or your company that way. So how different it is when you're on the negotiation table as an entrepreneur versus a politician. And now we'll go back to the role that Prime Minister Modi is playing. So he earlier also I have heard probably he says that he's open to listen to what they expect, or so he's not like snatching, or there's no tug of war kind of. That's the kind of environment he created in White House with former president also, is what my impression is based on what I heard. Your take?
Yes. So if you could just repeat that question.
Sure. So negotiation skill as a politician, do you put upfront what you expect to gain out of that meeting, or you keep it open and be a listener and then let it grow?
Yes, so I think listening is equally important in both the fields. I think the strategy is very similar on both sides, in the sense you are communicating what your needs are. You're keeping your cards, you don't put all your cards on the table, you kind of hold back on some of them and put it out at the right moment. And that is, I've seen that happen even in the corporate world. If done well, that's the same process that is used even in the political world too. So I would say there's a lot of similarities between the negotiating tactics, and it depends on what power. And when I just talked about the charisma and character and competence, among these three, it depends on how much of that you have, that you'll be able to play these cards at the right time. So it looks like Prime Minister Modi has a good bank of these things. So he's able to kind of play the cards. Whenever there's a world crisis, he's able to play the cards right because he's got an abundance of all these skills that is required to lead.
Yeah. So generally the impression is money make things happen. And you say you put your money where your heart is or things like that. So now that economic strength, does that play the key role in any country's head of that particular country to have proper hearing from other counterparts?
So it certainly plays a role, you cannot deny that, but at the same time, for many decades, India has not been a superpower or not been a key player, but yet India had played an important role in the world stage, even as the leader of the non-aligned movement in the 70s and 80s, coming into the 90s. So although it was not an economic power at those days, nothing compared to what it is now, yet India had its say because of the fact that they played their cards very smartly. So even if you go back 30, 40 years, India has been playing their cards for that time. They've been playing it the right way, and therefore they have built a following in other world leaders. And now Modi ji is taking it to the next level in terms of leadership, because now the economic power is also there to back him up, right? So it is only a question of evolution of that leadership from where it was a few decades ago to where Prime Minister Modi is taking it now.
So we come to the corporate world, and since you have had the experience of working with people from different ethnicity, people coming from different countries, and I believe there are n number of books where you are taught the etiquettes of interacting with and being culturally sensitive. So you are, I'm just giving an example. If you are interacting with someone who has come from Japan, then probably you should keep this thing in mind, etc. So that kind of very extensive teaching training is imparted to executives. Is that right? And the importance of knowing the cultural nuances of people you are going to work with, how significant is that?
I think it's very critical. I'll just give you an example so that your viewers are able to understand. I was part of an US trade mission to Europe, and we had gone to Spain and Portugal. Now in those countries, in the first meeting you don't talk business at all. It's only getting to know you as an individual person, getting to know your family, what your values are, what kind of food you like. So in the first meeting you never bring up business just like Americans do. In the US, usually the first meeting you ask for business, but that's not so the case in Europe. And similar things may happen in Asia too. You want to get to know the other person before you can talk business. So it's important to know this. You don't want to go into a meeting and start talking business when culturally they're not ready for it yet. So therefore, understanding the nuances of each culture is very important before you start doing business with a certain group of people. So there is a certain understanding about developing personal bond or relationship or having that sort of a trust. Now, bringing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's journey, coming from the chai wala or coming from a humble background to the stage where he is now, and he is making friends with world leaders. So leave aside the leadership part. As an individual, while you are able to relate to so many people, what is it that you need to consciously learn, assimilate, and then be in a position that you are at ease and at comfort? Because if you just look at it from a distance, you are likely to have a lot of pressure of a whole nation and your upbringing and all that. So keeping that,
how do you analyze the way Prime Minister Narendra Modi has created a position for himself?
I think what he has gone through in his life in terms of his background, and you mentioned Chaiwala, which is what he was when he was a young boy, actually helps him in this kind of a role. And the reason being that when you are doing a job that requires you to be humble in front of anybody, right? Even if somebody is telling you something bad, you still accept it and you are humble, you learn from that experience. So that is what builds a lot of what is called grit or resiliency. That is important. So therefore, what experience you have been through in childhood really plays a significant role when you assume a leadership role. And I think that helped him. And this, by the way, is what has been helping a lot of Indian Americans do so well in the US, including corporate leaders, including people in the government, people in many industries like technology, healthcare, etc. It's because they have been through a lot of experiences when they were young, where they had to interact with a lot of people, and they had to be humble and learn a lot of things. You don't have those opportunities so much these days. So kids are, I would say, at a disadvantage in a culture like the US as opposed to having grown up in India. And I think that is what gives Prime Minister Modi that edge. He's been through a lot in his life. And when he comes to the table, he has seen a lot of people and he knows how to interact with them. And that gives him a position of power. He's able to really transact business based on his understanding of what's going on in that room. And he's able to kind of get the best deal possible for his country.
And what you said also reminds me of late we have heard certain statements making India's position clear from the Foreign Minister of India, and they have gone viral because he's candid and he's putting across his point of view from his nation in a way which we have not heard actually. So again, coming to the communication skill, which is important wherever you are actually. What we are doing is also something parallel to that. Mm-hmm. But it becomes even more important when what you say is going to create such a large scale impact. Now, as a professor, what you are teaching, leadership and innovative entrepreneurship, do you also give enough importance to communication skill?
Of course we do. In fact, that is, I would say, it is part of the entire program. So it's not something that we just teach one course or one day, but throughout their journey as a student, we always keep emphasizing communication and the different ways you do it. So it's not only written, but also how you speak and how you act and even how you behave. So therefore, I think that is an important aspect. And again, if you go there, Prime Minister Modi has really mastered that aspect of communication. When he speaks to whether it's a small group of people or a big crowd, he masters that aspect. So therefore, he is very effective in that setting. And the same thing can be said of, for example, Barack Obama was supposed to be the great communicator. Before that, Ronald Reagan, Clinton, etc. And that's because of the fact that they understood how to interact with different groups of people and what wavelength. They can adjust their wavelength depending on what is needed to suit a particular situation. So that's a very important element of leadership. And that's something Prime Minister Modi has really done extremely well.
Yeah. So now looking at Prime Minister Modi's address in different countries and the kind of energy which is generated, personally I think he takes you to an emotional ride in the first few minutes, and there is a sense of relatability, and he would know what place he is speaking and what is relevant for them, and then he will gradually take them to India's growth story. Am I right the way I saw it?
Exactly right. So making that emotional connection is at the heart of communication. Unless you make that, you really cannot ask people to do anything beyond what they would normally do. Right? So leadership is all about asking people to do things that they would not normally do. right? So if people are normally doing something and have a leader cannot really claim that they have influenced them. So having them do something beyond that, that is where leadership comes in. And for that, you really need to connect at an emotional level. And like you mentioned, he starts with stories to do that could connect at an emotional level, and only then he asks them to do, let's say for example, clean up the Ganges or the Ganga river. After you have made that case as to why you should do it, why it is important for us to do it, and then if you make that ask, it becomes easier. People understand there is a purpose why they do it, right? And that's how you make it effective.
Yeah. So actually what we are discussing is not about one person.
Yeah.
It is universally applicable principles which should help you engage audience, whether these are the students who are going to appear in 9th, 10th grade, or President Biden or Australian Prime Minister, etc., or corporate executive CEOs. So the kind of range that you see in this man, this is amazing actually. So this is not like worship of an individual. I'm just looking at the qualities that he has imbibed and is sharing with the world at large. Any way as academician, you would say that these are the top 3 things that are helping him in communicating?
Well, I think that's it's a great observation. And I would say few things that are helpful is to have actually been through those experiences in real life. So if you have been in that scenario where you're interacting with people who are, for example, younger to you, much older to you, then you build that wavelength, you communicate to them at different wavelengths, right? And that is, I think, what is helping him right now the most. But I think also equally important is to come from a place of trust, which means that you should have good intentions. That's where the character element comes in, right? If you have the good intentions, then people trust you. And if you can build that trust, then it's easy to communicate effectively. And the final aspect is competence too. Competence is very important, and I think this is one area, for example, I can say, without getting into politics, that where Donald Trump has failed as president is because that element was missing. He was not able to deliver, the competence element was missing, right? And that is a gap. But I think in the case of Prime Minister Modi, he's able to deliver on the competence elements too. For example, the economy of India, where it was 10 years ago, where it is now, is kind of a sea change. Now it is the 5th largest economy, soon going to be the 3rd largest economy. It is the youngest economy in terms of people, and therefore there's so much energy behind it, and that's because of the vision articulated by him, and following it through in terms of giving it resources, giving it the right leadership, and being the right spokesman at the right forums. So all these things have laid out the growth path for India.
As you talked about vision, and so I'll come to your TIE also, but the number of startups and the unicorns in India, unimaginable in the last 6-7 years or so, which brings me to the innovative approach of an entrepreneur. And how, let us come to the organization that now you are going to be leading in New Jersey chapter, the Indus Entrepreneurs. What is the focus and how it helps entrepreneurs, and how simplify the term Indus in this context?
Right. So Indus just stands for the Indus River. So people who came from that area, which means India, but also to include the surrounding countries. So people who came from South Asia is essentially. So when this organization was formed about 30 years ago in Silicon Valley, so a group of Indian entrepreneurs who have done extremely well, they felt that it is time for us to give back to the next generation, help them along with respect to mentoring, networking, giving them funding when required. So that's the genesis of this idea called TIE, or the Indus Entrepreneur. And from there it has gone to become one of the world's largest professional development and networking organizations. They are now present in about 60 countries. We've got over 30,000 members. Right here in New Jersey, we have about 300-400 members. and we have a higher level of membership called charter membership, which is mostly people who have been very successful as entrepreneurs, and that we have over 100. So it is one of the fast growing chapters, and I would encourage young entrepreneurs who have good ideas to come and join us. And it need not be technology, by the way. It can be of any field, where they can come when they need mentorship, some advice on different things, or want people to be part of their team. We can help create the network effect to help them along.
And since we are talking about economy with entrepreneurship, it's kind of going hand in hand. So your take on the current situation in America, where President Biden is facing the kind of challenge that if in certain stipulated time the debt limit is not increased, it may have very, very adverse repercussions for America.
Well, I think frankly it is a situation that should never have happened. Reason being that this is the national debt created not by one party, not by one president. This has happened over many, many years, and till now always the debt limit has been increased, because in the Constitution it says that the credit of the United States should never be defaulted or never be in doubt. So it is backed by the Constitution, so therefore it should never be in doubt. I think it is politics at play. Unfortunately, the Republicans, since they've taken over the Congress, the House, they are playing hardball with him. But I believe that they will come to some resolution a few days before.
That reference of negotiation will again come into play, and they want to get something out of it.
Correct.
But just in the last 1 minute, I go back to very big reference of transformational leadership. And if you give us two major areas where you see Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated his vision of transforming the world to a better place.
So I think the major elements of or features, you can say, of transformational leaders is that they don't think short term. They're not looking at what's going to happen in the next month or two or a year. They're looking at 5, 10, 20 years down the line. So that, I think Prime Minister Modi has very clearly demonstrated that he's looking at things even beyond his time. So I think that is the fundamental aspects of transformational leadership. They do not negotiate based on what is in their best interest for right now. They look at what is at the best interest for the majority of the people over the long term. So I think that those are some of the foundational elements of transformational leadership, which has been displayed by almost all great leaders has this trait in them.
So I think today this is a transformational program for us, because Professor Suresh presents, and we look forward to more of such sessions where we understand the insight that is helpful in enlightening you to be the best in your chosen field. So I really thank you for joining us, and lots of good wishes for you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanking him and thanking all of you, and of course Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is Ashok Vyas. Namaste.